Hello, everybody. Welcome to our virtual art salon. I'm Liz Farrell, Artistic Director of Painting, Drawing, and Printmaking. Today, I'll be in conversation with Yuri Kobayashi, and we're really excited to have her here today. On behalf of our president, Peter Wanders, who's watching as well, and our board of trustees, we thank you for joining us. And Yuri, we're gonna just have you turn on your video and unmute yourself. And
this and then that.
there you are. Hi.
All right. Hi, Liz.
Welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so Yuri is a past artist in residence at Anderson Ranch, as well as summer faculty here. She's really beloved as our summer faculty has been coming here for years. And it's such an honor to have you here today.
I'm excited, hopefully this summer too, that I can go back there.
Yeah, I know everything's so unpredictable, but we are optimistic and we hope we get to see you in the flesh this summer here at the ranch. Yeah. So we're gonna start with a conversation, and then we're gonna have a question answer period in the end. Audience, I just wanna ask you to please type your questions at any time into the Q&A box. I'll be happy to pose them to Yuri. Only I can see your question. So again, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box. You can type your questions right into there at any time during the talk. And when we're done with our talk, I'll be posing some questions to Yuri to answer. So thank you, Yuri. Let's get started now.
Okay.
So we're gonna bring up your presentation, and we have a little bit of your artist statement up here, and I just wanted to say that in your artist statement, you talk about how Japanese ethics, aesthetics, and culture has a deep impact on your work before you even recognized it. And I liked that statement about before you even recognized it. Can you give us some examples of that and how that happened for you?
Well, something that like you never paid attention if you stay in your own country, that your nationality, like probably if you are born in the United States and you're living in the United States, probably, you know, like unless you see news or like compared to something else, otherwise you don't recognize or like not be aware even like nationality. So like I was not aware in that until I moved to United States, that I'm different, or like I think different, or my behavior that I thought that it's common in back in Japan is slightly different than in this culture. So like I would not realize unless I moved to United States. And that kind of like revealed not just everyday life, but also through my work too, that I was not conscious all the time, but it came through it. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it must have been, I mean, I wonder what it was like to you to come to the United States, and what were some of the things. We can also, if you want, you can say next slide. You don't have to be shy, and scroll to the next.
It makes sense when I started to my presentation, because I talk about my background and how I got to this point and how my work evolved. So why don't we just start with that?
Okay, next slide, please.
And so, like Liz introduced me, born and grew up in Japan, and the essence of Japanese ethics and aesthetics and culture were embedded in me before I recognize it. And this is a glimpse of Tokyo. Slides that you're seeing is a glimpse of Tokyo. So just to want everybody to know that it's not just the skyscrapers, but also parks and greens and some night scenes. And next, please. And this showing kind of cultural part about Japan, and those roots are exuded not only through my everyday activities or behaviors, but also through my work. And let's go next. And grew up in a culture that holds strong relations with the tree. My curiosity towards wooden objects and buildings came naturally. I chose to study architecture in an art school, and but unfortunately or fortunately, soon I found in reality that an architect is not to build, but to design and draw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, you talked a little bit about the puzzle-like structures of these rooftops. And I love that description. And I'm wondering how these traditional wooden Japanese buildings sort of serve as an inspiration for your work. And I wonder if you intentionally, as you were making sculptures and became more of a sculptor, if you intentionally made your work to kind of imitate these structures, or whether this is something that emerged naturally and you looked at it and thought, oh wow, I know where this comes from.
Well, that's a good question. And then I always wondered that, like, about myself too, that I loved it puzzle type of like aspect of architecture, wooden buildings when since I was little. That's the reason why I studied architecture. But I'm not intentionally delivering that puzzle like future to my work. It just came out probably naturally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, let's go next. And so quickly my path shifted. So I kind of worked for architecture firm for a short time after I finished undergraduate study. My path shifted and geared towards getting my hand dirty. I enrolled in a 2-year program, private woodworking school that located in a rural city, Takayama, about the 200-mile northwest of Tokyo. And you can kind of see on the top row slides the 4 different seasons, and the bottom row is in the winter, but that's showing that school that I went to.
That's absolutely gorgeous.
It's beautiful. I love that town. It's beautiful.
Must have been amazing to be there.
Yeah. And so this school, I think you can go to next slides. This school offers a unique curriculum that includes rice cultivation and forestry in addition to woodworking. And well, I think or I believe the importance of process was stressed in each field, and not just learning woodworking, but also I learned the importance of process through this rice cultivation or forestry. And so top, you kind of see students planting rice. This will be late May, early summer, and then harvesting rice on the top right. And the bottom, like we are going to woods or forest and pick up acorn and bring that seed back to school property and then plant it, like you can see bottom low, and then grow the tree, baby trees up until maybe 3 to 5 years, and then bring that back to woods or mountain and then plant it. And so sometimes, particularly fall, we go into woods and what kind of trees growing in that area and how old that might be. We are checking the size and stuff like that.
So how did that process, I mean, that's a really interesting process. I've never heard of that, where, you're nurturing this acorn tree and then you're bringing it back into the sort of the wild, as you might call it. But
Yeah.
what was that like for you? And that
Well, I mean, I think it was a great experience and good to know that nothing come out like from right to left. or not like it's not just magic. It takes time like to get the result. Like rice cultivation, it takes almost a year. You prep for the field in the winter, early spring, and then plant it. And then you maintain and control like water irrigation system. And then you still keep eye for bags or water, and then you harvest it. I mean, you cut it off and then you harvest it and stuff like that. It takes almost 1 year. And then tree, it takes so long to grow. And then even like we believe the lumber that we are actually using to make furniture or housing, it 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, possibly 100 years old, right? So like I think in that way, like you kind of it's not quite the muscle memory like a bicycle riding, but you kind of physically feel the process and time and importance of it. And so I kind of projected that experience to the woodworking too. And that was kind of easier for students to probably understand how long it could take.
And so would you say that, I mean, I know it depends on the project. You can't say how long a work takes because it varies depending on what you're making, but do you think about that process as you're making your work? And it seems like I've always noticed a certain sense of patience that you have with yourself. And I know a lot of artists who sort of try to rush through to get a product or a result. And it seems like every step of the way is very important to you as an artist.
Yeah, I think I learned woodworking, I mean, through the school or like through the training, I learned patience, not just about the woodworking.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing to learn. A lot of us have not learned that yet. So,
and then the next slides kind of showing that major part, the woodworking. And then of course the main focus is woodworking, and 8 to 5, 6 days in a week, total 2 weeks break in a year. The learning of woodworking consists of 2 phases. At daytime between 8 and 5 by making product items designed by a parent company called Oak Village. And in this case, like making hundreds to 1,000. And in the evening, there is a night lectures. And late night and Sunday, we or students works do assignments and execute this project. And while making a product item, students work as a team, like 3 to 4 as a group, make an assembly line per item. You can kind of see the bottom picture, the piles of boxes and boxes and boxes. And the second year students kind of making a right bottom a piece of furniture. And students kind of like works as a team and strive to make the deadline, and that usually takes 3 weeks to 4 weeks a month. Lumber selection, from lumber selection to finishing and packing. And so I kind of gained not only woodworking skills but also patience this way.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by the stacking and just all the planning that goes into this process. It's incredible.
Yeah. And then this was 2-year program. Maybe you can go to next slides, please. And so 2-year program, and then after that I still felt kind of short, so I worked at the school as a staff for 4 years, maintaining machinery, ordering supplies, and supervising assembly lines, etc. But last year of working there as a staff, many thanks to Wendy, you can see the picture right there, I had an opportunity to study in her program at San Diego State University for a semester. And it may sounds like impossible act, but I quit the job after that, moved anyway to San Diego, and then began studying English at, like as I move and then study English. And Wendy used to run the furniture. Now she has retired, but used to run the furniture program at the San Diego State University for many years. But now, like as an artist and now my mentor, role model, inspired me to go to grad school back then. And I really like that, and I never forget the hard refrain phrase, "You got to be a little insane." I really love that. And I still, yeah, Wendy, so like you can kind of see her saying that, right, to us. And then that's still like inherent in my spirit.
Yeah, and can you tell us a little more about her and what it was like to work with her? And
Well, she visited when I was still back in the woodworking school in Japan as a student. When I was a student, she visited and she did the slide kind of talk and demonstration, and it was just blew my mind. It was way different the way that I learned the traditional methods like furniture building in Japan, and what she showed her work and then her peers work and then her students work was like it was just shocking. And I just wanted to see what I could do with my woodworking skills. So I think without her visiting Japan or showing or talking or meeting Wendy, I would not have been in this country. So biggest, the best part of my life, I guess.
Wow, that's a bold statement. I like that.
Okay, let's go next.
Before I know we're going to start talking about your work, and I'm really excited about that. I think everybody's really thrilled to see that and to hear from you. Your work has a delicate grid-like structure.
Like you see this picture?
Yeah, and it seems to like appear almost out of thin air. I think your work kind of, it's so delicate and almost weightless, and yet you build them. I'm wondering if you have a concrete plan in mind as you begin these pieces, and you can tell us more about them, but or whether they evolve more organically.
I do have not quite a concrete, but a rough idea how I'm gonna construct it. But yes, I don't have a definite plan, so it evolve or shift or changes as I go. And and this it kind of limit by the seating height, the grad studio space that I was working in. So I had to stop certain point, but I was gonna go as high as I could, kind of. So, and yeah, the earlier grad school with my architecture background, inevitably, like in my sketchbook, always began with straight lines, and which always resulted in a grid-like patterns or geometric shapes. And this one is, I think, taller than 10 feet.
Oh.
And yeah, and so yeah, it's hard to tell, but it's taller than 10 feet and 17 drawers. And it has a subtle curvature in the overall form. Yeah, it consists of square lattice, like you pointed out, lattice grid structure. And that was, yes, like my architectural background just naturally came out. But this title, it says being, so it's kind of my representation of kind of figure or human or.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, and I think of drawers as containing surprises or secrets, and it's always so exciting to open drawers, especially if you don't know what's in them. And I guess there's an interesting connection to the human sort of
Right.
complexity of the human being.
I should have put something in there when I had that grad show, but I left it kind of empty.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Okay, let's go next. And this one's kind of like, I think, represents well for my training. This is overall length of 17, 18 feet and nearly 40,000 Morrison tenon joint. If you're not familiar with woodworking term, that's the connection that each vertical and horizontal member connects, has a certain type of joint, and that's more than 4,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so like, but the way that I learned, trained woodworking, like doing same thing over and over and over and again, sometimes hours, sometimes more than a day, like more than 8 hours. So I don't have hesitation to get on something like this. So it would be, I would be like, yeah, cutting the same length or same joinery for like overnight.
Would you call yourself obsessive?
You could call that. You could.
It's great.
Yeah. And so next image, please. And about halfway in the graduate program, so the San Diego had the 3 years program. About halfway, I kind of craved for change. It was a time to expand my artistic vocabulary and realize that resources to generate ideas and the designs are everywhere. Like you can see kind of this image, my kind of collection of images or collage, getting inspired by forms and patterns in nature and fascinated by structures from architecture to a bird wings. And let's go next. And so taking a number of ceramic courses also guided me to work with organic forms in intuitive manner. Because of my own struggle with language, for my graduate thesis, I dropped completely an idea of functional or practical aspect to create the work, instead focused on how a work could express thoughts and feelings without verbalized explanation. So this kind of title phase, I did installation combining porcelain and wood.
Yeah, and can you speak a little bit about how you merge porcelain, wire, and wood? And do you feel like there's separate elements that remain independent, or do they seem to amalgamate organically and come together for you?
Well, I kind of tried. My attempt, my intent was to like you use the good word that I cannot even say right.
Mhm.
Kind of unite or like kind of trying to mimic like universe, like all natures and us, human, animals, like all together. So like using wood, and then yes, I do have like a metal parts that are looks now that to me just a little bit too mechanical, but I wanted to kind of like merge, not as a materialness, but more as a whole thing for this installation. So wood or a porcelain or metal, I almost wanted to erase that materialness.
Mhm. That makes sense. Okay.
Okay,
Makes sense.
next.
Okay, so you showed me this presentation and we kind of looked at it beforehand, and I was really surprised when I came to this, and I'm really curious to hear from you because this has to do with a children's book and its
Mhm,
inspiration for you.
mhm.
I have young children, and I'm finding more and more that children's books hold the answers to many of the world's challenges.
Yeah.
And they tackle a lot of issues like cooperation, jealousy, problem solving, and so much more. It's kind of amazing to me that I can find most of the answers to my problems in a children's book.
Mhm.
Um, I find it interesting that you've included this. So could you tell us a little bit about how this children's book fits into your work?
Well, I think this represents well. I believe in the idea that collected many small together can lead to like meaningful and powerful outcome more than just the sum of the parts. And this book, Swimi, written by Leone, translated to so many languages that show up in, I think, Japanese literature or linguistic. I don't remember the subject, but in a textbook that I read at an age of 6, and this inspired me, that idea. And since then, like, I have been attached to it. So you can kind of see a lot of my work that are consists of many small parts all together because of this.
Yeah, and that sense of repetition in the work, it shows drawing a lot. Yeah.
I think you can kind of see the next image, next work. Go
to the next slide.
Flip next. Yep. Like that's kind of in response that oftentimes my work is composed of many of the small parts, and this case, without assuring a skeptical structure sound, I trust my gut and then I dive in. It is risky when a plan that you hope it to work, yet nothing is guaranteed. You will not know a result until the end. This piece, believing my interpretation of onsen, something to hold on to, is a good sample that my idealistic plan works out, luckily, in the end. This is like 6 feet diameter, wheel-like structure made of many parts, standing on its own without the glue. And so like I had to go to the specific site. Whenever I get a chance to show this, I have to go by myself and assemble.
That's incredible. And it's interesting too how the shadow becomes almost like a drawing on the floor.
Yeah. Well, I think next slides has a different view or detail. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's interesting because you have a lot of really beautiful titles of your work. This one's called Believing.
Mm-hmm.
And coming up, you're going to show us some images.
Yeah, let's see that.
Courage and return. And I'm wondering, as we look through these works, if you could talk a little bit about your titles. I know that there are a lot of artists watching, and I think titling work can be one of the biggest challenges. I know that my students and me, myself, kind of agonize over titles. And I'm curious how, you know, when you're making a sculpture out of wood, how you're thinking about these things as you're working.
Yeah, can you show them next slide then? And yeah, this is the well. And if you go to next, and that's courage. And then, and so if you can go, shoot.
We might be able to go backwards if you need to. I don't know.
If you can go forward, flip a couple of image. Also, I think we need to go speed up probably a little bit because it's
we're good.
Yeah, let's go skip that, and then one more and one more. And so this is the return, and and if you go next one, let's see, this might kind of explain a little bit better. When I kind of thinking or pondering about the sculpture, many resources as a card that are sorted out in the 3 boxes in the slides kind of showing on the left side in my mind. And one box holds the cards of forms, patterns, and structure inspired by nature, architecture, and landscapes, like my collection of images. And another box filled with the card of subject matters that I would like to capture, which are usually emotional qualities and current or in the memory based off of my personal experiences. And the other box is the collection of the card of my experience and experiments of techniques. And then I play cards to match it. And then simultaneously design and the planning begins. So like when you see like this kind of diagram that I quickly made, like when I targeting like a sculpture, like ignoring completely practicality or functionality of it, then always what I want to depict is kind of emotional thing, because based off of my experience, personal experience. So that's why I think the title a lot of times has kind of emotional, or what I trying to express is trying to communicate with viewer emotionally, or trying to provoke something. Is that
really amazing? I don't know that I've ever seen an artist sort of diagram their internal and
like it helps. A lot of people actually ask me that question, and then I always kind of mumble, and then I could not explain well. And so this may hopefully help.
Yeah, it's a really smart way
to understand a little bit better.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Actually, I think every artist should have to do this to know to explain, because it really simplifies and expresses it in a clear way. This is great. Thank you for showing.
Thank you. And can you go back one slide? Yeah. So this one, the title is Return, but I particularly wanted to mention because this was born of artist in residency at there on the Ranch in already 8 years ago, 2012. The collaboration that I did during that residency with a ceramic artist Seam, and it's about 10 inches tall ceramic egg-like form with jillion holes. The Seam worked out, and this was passed down to me, and so I needed to respond to it. So this was kind of like something that during that residency, I saw his work and he saw my work, and then I kind of approached, initiated to him, would you be interested to do collaboration with me? And he said yes, and then he passed this work to me, and then I responded this way. And that his work looked to me the beat up wounded person, like barely breathing, and so I kind of supplied or applied like a seat, type of like a seat that can rest.
So a place of rest and support. Yeah, it definitely has that sense about it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So, and maybe like we can skip this slide and the next one.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you a little bit about your useful objects, and maybe I'm wondering a little bit as we look at these, about that dilemma of function versus non-functional. I think a lot of people who work in wood have to kind of grapple with that a lot, and then other areas as well, ceramics. And so a lot of us who are watching today have had this sort of battle. And I'm wondering, as a common conversation that you might be having, does it help or does it inhibit you as an artist to even think about that or worry about that?
Well, it is always a battle. You are right. And well, it's from time to time my interest shift between non-functional or non-practical, or between like size-wise, scale-wise, like a small and large. And I wish I could purely make things like a child in a playground, nothing to do with financial matters. That reality is bittersweet, as we know. That I have learned that functional piece, let's say you can say furniture, for my case, bring the chance and means for life to flow, means bring cash to me. And so regardless, I like taking on the challenges and the problem solving, which is my deep rooted motivation in making. But yes, like when I make functional or practical item, my focus should be other people. But when I'm working on sculpture, like non-functional object, then my focus is only on me. That's the biggest battle, or struggle that I have to shift it. And that's the kind of always hardest part. And when I make sculpture, I can be selfish, just me. But when I'm designing a table, chair, shelf, something that useful object, then forget about myself, how other people would be using it. So like focus need to be others.
So is it ever kind of a relief to be able to shift off of the me, which can be a little intense at times, and then go into a functional object so you can not have to think about yourself for a minute? Is that sort of
healthier? I think that kind of like a healthier way to live, I think. If I can just like living in sculpture, probably I go just like me, zone into my world. That could be not quite healthy, I think. It's a way to communicate other people, so that kind of helps for me to think about useful objects, so that way like I would be asking other people, friends, other makers that what do you think? I think it's better going back and forth helps me.
That's great.
So like quickly, I think we can see functional piece and where you are. Oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, okay. So this one is a side table container / non-mechanical speaker. Well, it was funny. I designed based off of iPhone 5, which I still use to dock for a sound amplifier feature. As I completed this, the Apple, of course, released iPhone 6, which was more significant in many aspects, and it was good lesson, not so smart to design a product around Apple products. And
well, it's a beautiful object. I can imagine that. I mean, they come out with a new iPhone so rapidly. It'd be hard to keep up.
yeah, hard to keep up. Yeah, let's go next. And this is the set of the Warhead cabinets generated by the offcuts of the previous my work. So you saw the speaker / container bucket table, and this I kept it since I made it, I think 5 same item. So offcuts, I kept all of them. And so this is kind of byproduct of that table. Made it into a Warhead cabinet, and then I actually like this better than a table.
Beautiful.
Let's go next. And this is the lamp that covered in the snow, a broken street lampshade found on the Central Street in Maine. So Madison, sorry. This I made when I was doing a residency at University Madison, Wisconsin, Madison. And then I kind of picked up the glasses on the broken street lampshade, and just picked up the glass and made it into a lamp. Okay, let's go to next. And this is the set of the chair and the side table. I kind of envision the quality in a chair for food I ideally want to be. And since the chair asked for a company, so I offered the side table. Unfortunately, the two are separated, and they reside at the different home. Means I kind of made it as a set, but sold at the different people. So this is different view. Next one. And the next one I think shows different picture of the table. Yeah, that's right.
Those are really gorgeous, and your sense of balance and what you have to think about to make these things so they don't fall over. I know that's another furniture like challenge and dilemma, and it's probably old news to everybody on here who does furniture, but I really am always, amazed by anyone who can make a chair that'll actually hold someone's body and make a table that will stand up. It's really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's the challenging part. If that you call it, or I call it sculpture, then it doesn't have to support the weight of body. But if just look like a chair, but but when I make chair, it's supposed to provide a certain level of comfort and support the body weight. And so that is really, yes, challenging and always gives me a headache. Yeah, so this is another side table. And it's interesting that you pointed out earlier that my work, like I think either sculpture or functional, always end up as really light. Like light in weight wise, and always my crate when I have to ship it somewhere, the crate is way heavier, and then actually material cost wise to make that crate actually costs more than a piece. I know it's funny, but always like that.
So incredible, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Okay, this one's showing a kind of Mindscape series, and then going back to my sculpture. On and off, I have been working on this Mindscape series using the same shape and the mold. So I'm gonna quickly go over so you kind of like see everything is actually same shape. And let's go first one, next one. And then this one, more than over a decade, I have not stayed in one place continuously longer than 8 months. I have been carrying such a nomadic life by choice, and I am fine, yet losing a sense of home. On a continuous bumpy ride, the vehicle with 4 wheels supports my living style, and I continue to search for my next journey. And so this is ride, and the next Mind series is this chase. Sometimes beaten up by a cruel reality. From time to time, I learned there are things you can reach and barely touch it, but never be achievable and obtainable, no matter how hard you work for it. Okay, let's next mind. This wheel is rolling. Fears arise when not knowing of what is ahead. Also, fears freeze me when I know exactly how it will be like. I stop and then imagine what could happen towards that moment of the mind battle. Should I go or no? Maybe fine, unless otherwise I will never know. So this is battle. And let's go next. And this is burst. Accumulated frustration and layers of uncertain overcast my head, not knowing what exactly they are. So it grows inside, just like too much air inflated in a balloon, and eventually it explodes. I scream out loud in the studio or at the beach, and surprisingly it feels better afterwards. It's okay and better to let it out. Let's go next.
It's really interesting how you work so much from your imagination. And
Well, that's I think kind of makes sense. Like we are talking about, you questioned me about the title. So like in my mind, like the certain like experience, the emotion that I want to capture, and the shape that I have seen in the nature.
yeah,
And
and you know,
I kind of yeah.
it's interesting because you've also been described to me as a really amazing teacher. I mean, people love to take workshops from you and learn from you. And I'm wondering how you kind of combine or how you think about process. And you can't teach imagination, right? But you can maybe teach or help and facilitate people and yourself to access that and kind of shifting back from functional to non-functional, and then sort of, you know, process to imagination to working organically to planning. It just seems like it's such an easy shift for you to make, and it's really interesting.
Thank you. Well, yes, probably it's hard to teach imagination, but don't you think that as a you artist painter, and now that you are mother of 2, the as we age or grown up or age, you kind of started to like be shy about the imagining, or like kids are good at it.
Yes, they are.
And then as we get adult, like become adult, and then we become bashful or embarrassed, or we don't talk about it, but everybody has ability to imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know if that's training, or I'm still want to be like a kid, or I am a kid.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it.
And for this one is whisper. Once in a while, I hear a whisper of evil, a sweet invitation to so-called a black hole or a rabbit hole. The whispering sounds so appealing and even soothing in my wrecked mind. Once getting caught, trapped in it, I knew it's almost impossible getting out of it. I wish there were no whispers, and then I strive to cancel the noise. Okay, let's go next. And letting out and turning my thoughts and feeling into three-dimensional abstract form helps me to shape my life. Distracted by too many antennas, this piece, curio, an abstract format of a creature, could be myself, occupied with many negative thoughts and disturbing emotions, keeping from being sane. I focus on listening to my heart. And yeah, so a lot of times, like we are talking about earlier, going back and forth, functional and non-functional or practical to useful object, going back and forth helps for me to be probably sane. And I believe for myself, that's healthier way to live. Okay, let's go next one. Slightly different, and that's kind of showing that my study and the experimentation and looking for large scale installation. And you can see next slides that are results. This is like also repetitive use of simple and the same bending form. The coalescence is a site-specific installation. This case, I used about 260 bent units jointed by metal hardware and suspended from the here and there from this monofilament from the ceiling, engaged to activate the space. And this was 2018 at Arizona State University Art Museum. And probably next slide shows closer view or different view, and the next one also detailed view. Yeah.
So wood bending is such a delicate process, and it's so beautiful and interesting to see. I know there are different ways to do it, but how does that process sort of speak to you, and what's exciting to you about that?
Well, like bending a foam, like I spent quite a bit of time, like a simple bending a foam that I can kind of like link together, connect it together in some way to do an installation. And then I did, at this point, I already had a map or a plan view of the space, and then I was able to actually see the space, and I kind of mocked it up how I was going to utilize this simple bending form, connect together to create this, let's say like a line, organic line to fill the space or connect the architectural element to the other. And I even had that rough idea, but it was actually fun and it took way more time to actually install it. It took me more than 2 weeks to do this. And sometimes like I was working on a ladder and connect 5 or 10 and getting off the ladder and to take a look at, no, I don't like it. And undone, take it undone, and then do it again. So that going back and forth kind of took me a long time, but I really had fun. I had fun a lot by doing this. And so this is kind of going back and forth, but our next slide's kind of showing that you can kind of see the using the exact same bending form, making a useful object well, a part of useful object mirror. And the next slide showing that it's exactly same bent, but it's just larger and turning it into a 3 legs supporting glass top. And then I think next slide is this one is inspired by what consists of our body, which involuntarily synchronize each other to function. This is my first attempt for a kinetic sculpture operated by 2 linear actuators. I don't know if you can, okay, next slides, please. And this is the what's made of. It's like beyond 200, 300 parts.
Incredible.
And so this next slide is, yeah, it's a different view. And then I think next slide shows a closer detailed view. And then I wonder next slide kind of shows the, can you click the video? Is that possible?
Oh, neat. That's wonderful.
Well, this is a time-lapse video that actually about 10 to 12 times faster. So when you get in to the space and seeing this moves, you hardly notice. It's so slow.
Yeah. Wow. This is another thing sort of about your sense of time and patience. And, yeah.
So I had fun. And then probably next slides kind of showing that part of overview of my solo show at the Arizona State University, my installation and curio and this kinetic sculpture all together. And next one. Okay, this one's going back to reality, functional. I was struggling making a rocking chair for a commission. And so I'm not good at the drawing. So usually I do making the models. This case is 1:5 scale. And then go from there and write pictures showing my bending mode for the rocker. And then I think next one, can you also click, that's also a video showing my steam bending. Can you show the video? Yep. I will be doing this summer, hopefully, in the workshop.
Yeah.
Maybe not this large scale, but the workshop that I would like to cover is bending. So I will be doing something like this, smaller scale.
Amazing.
And probably next slide shows that rocking chair. Yep. And next one is probably better view.
So as we look at, I don't know how many slides we have left.
Well, I think this is the last one. And this one's kind of showing that sneak peek of summer workshop that I and Christian we will be teaching.
Oh, great. Great.
So like you saw like a big steam bending parts of the rocking chair, but also like what we can do quickly, and you can see the result much quicker in a workshop manner. Like you can bend something quick and then let it dry, and the syringe has been perfect in the summer.
It is certainly
dry so quick, perfect. So that's the kind of like a small base that you will be working on. And then I think this is last slide. Yep.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Yuri. This is
Oh, thank you for putting up with me.
oh no, it was an honor and a treat for everyone. We have a couple of questions. I know we're getting kind of towards the end of the
Yeah.
hour, but maybe we can just quickly ask a couple of them. We have a question from Leah, and her question is, it makes a lot of sense to include forestry in a woodworker's education. Do you feel like this full circle mentality is present in the larger wood community? Or have you found it specific to certain cultures?
Oh, I don't know specific to the certain culture, but I know that quite a few woodworkers or furniture makers that actually they are networking locally, that they cut down a tree and send it to sawyer and wait for a certain time and then come into the shop. So like engaging in the whole process in community based, not just individual. But I know a few people works like that, and then I think that's kind of excellent way to work. But when I go to just straight to the lumber yard, then you just buy the wood, and you totally lose that sense of like where it's from, or once it was a tree.
Yeah, that's interesting. The way we do that with wood, we do that with animals, we do that with when you buy meat at the store and you lose the sense. So it's
Right.
an interesting way to think about things as you're working with materials as an artist. Another question we have is from Glenn D'Souza. He says, Yuri, what is your method for making so many, and I'm gonna botch this, mortise and tenon joints? Did I say that right? Like in Passage 2. As a painter, I don't know those terms, but I'm sure you do. So go ahead.
Well, your question is like how? What was it?
What's your method for making so many of them?
Well, just to let you know, yes, I like, and then I like using hand tool, but that 4,000 mortise and tenon joint was done on machine table. So I just have to make that jig, so that way you are not actually making one by one. Well, cutting mortise is also a machine, but it cuts square using certain type of machine. And when making a tenon, is you make that jig so that you are making 10 or 20 at once. So it's not one by one operation.
That's pretty awesome. So it's a shortcut, but a good
one. Right. It took, let's say, like hours and hours, and then putting it together is a totally different ball game. So another, yeah.
That's great. One more question and then we'll wrap it up. But the question is, when you reinstall and essentially recreate pieces in different exhibition spaces, do you feel a sense of rebirth in the work? And then kind of added onto that, it says, it strikes me that the work could feel different or have a new life each time you take the time and love to build it up again.
I like that way that this person think rebirth. That's actually a great way to put it. But yeah, I'm kind of excited to do more of that installation and see the space, and then how I can kind of engage with the space, activate that space, and every time probably different. And I'm kind of looking forward to it. But I really like that. I appreciate that rebirth idea. I would use that.
Yeah, it is pretty great. So one last question, an anonymous person put this in, but they asked you, this is a tricky one, but how do you define sculpture, and do you think sculpture has limitations? And in a way, you already kind of talked about this a bit, sculpture versus functional, or whether maybe they are the same thing, but maybe you can answer that for this person. It's a broad question, but it's a good one.
Yeah, wow. Like I never felt the limitation in a sculpture, but I always has a limitation in furniture or useful objects. So probably I'm kind of sensing opposite or different than this person. So I'm kind of curious to know what area this person is feeling that limitation when you're making a sculpture, because I feel like more freedom.
Yeah.
Like unless it's not like a commission, then when I make sculpture is much more freedom than making a functional piece of furniture.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I want to thank you so much, Yuri, for your time and your generosity to share your practice with us and your background and everything. It's been a real pleasure. I have a few announcements to make before we sign off. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please go to our website to stay up to date on our workshop offerings, upcoming virtual art salons, and other events like our sculpturally distanced outdoor exhibition and our winter art sale beginning next week that will help raise money for Anderson Ranch scholarships. So thank you again, Yuri.
Well, thank you, Liz. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
See you in person this summer.
Let's plan on it. And,
and
yes, you too. Stay safe and good night to everyone. Thank you.
Bye.